Hey everyone, this is Nick with Tenacity.ai, my co-host Jason, and you're listening to the Cloud Cost Optimization Podcast. Today we're going to dive into a very specific solution for kind of instant cost savings, a way to think about your environment a little bit differently than some of the normal topics we talk about, and that is, scheduling infrastructure, scheduling instances. This is especially, helpful in environments where you haven't gone through yet the refactoring to ephemeral resources, where you're still using persistent resources. There is some rather significant savings you can get, and it's especially helpful if you've hit a month where you're over budget and you need to have an immediate impact on next week's and the coming week's cloud spending. So I guess, Jason, to dive into the topic, do you want to explain, one, just sort of the technique of scheduling instances and maybe some of the places where it's most advantageous?
Yeah, I think the concept is I have a number of workloads, right, that one, have the characteristic that aren't used 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, this might, your website, the company's website might not classify as one of these things, right, as an example. But these are, and by the way, everybody has stuff they run 24 hours a day that they don't need to. Everybody's got stuff out there. It might be.
We do.
We do, absolutely. And so this is the common denominator with all of the things in question here that could be party to some sort of scheduling of when they start and stop are resources that aren't used all the time. Think of development resources as an example, testing resources. And the concept is like, okay, I should be able to, with some sort of confidence, tell me when these things generally need to be run, right? And
Yep.
If we take the example of, say, your development infrastructure, right? You have a group of developers working on it, on a specific set of infrastructure, and they're not working 168 hours a week, right? They should. If they are, you've got some overworked staff, but they're working, let's say, 60 hours a week, right? Well, there's 100 hours a week that I have that I could potentially be avoiding any usage costs on whatever infrastructure they're using. That's a simplistic example. Test environments are another one. There's no reason to run test environments when you're not running testing, right? So that's another one. But in general, I have a group of resources that accumulate costs on a hourly, daily, monthly, whatever hourly, daily, minute perspective. And these are resources in which I may not, that can be classified as shut down during off hours, whatever that means to you.
Yeah, I've used scheduled instances for a number of years, or used the scheduling of instances for a number of years, and you always sort of get an initial reaction, people kind of shaking their head like, this is such a tactical fix. It's kind of in the minutia. It doesn't, the sort of the perception is it doesn't really have any value, right? Mm-hmm. And I always back up to just a really simple example of, when you're developing, your developers are in office. They might be working 10, 12, 14-hour days. God, I hope not. I hope you're better staffed than that and making better progress than that. But a typical sort of dev shop is up about 10 hours a day. Right, so figure we've got to bring instances online around 8 or 9 in the morning, dev environments, test environments, staging environments, et cetera, around 8 or 9 in the morning. And we're going to shut them back down around, we're generally done around 6 or 7 at night.
Right.
And that may flex. But if I just take that simple example of 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, so I got about 50 hours where there's an activity against that environment, that's under 30% utilization for the given week. So I've got 70% of the time, I've got resources that are running, that are costing me money, compute resources that are costing me money that I don't need to have running. So we're talking about immediately sort of a just round numbers, 70% savings without any commitment. Now that's the best savings vehicle I can get from a commitment-based strategy. So if I go buy reserved instances for, say, some EC2 instances, and I max out my benefit, max my commitment, pay everything up front, go 3 years, I can get a maximum of around 72%. And that's even kind of hard to get to. It's a stretch, but you can get in that 70% ballpark, but I've got to commit for 3 years. And I can't even do the upgrades, and I'm stuck in that instance family. So I always recommend this for those environments where it makes a lot of sense to schedule those instances out. And it's a super simple technique to get sort of an immediate savings tomorrow to get going with it.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And I think, to really, let's say compute that runs at on a regular interval, not demand based or not, event based. Let's say that's part of your strategy and has to be. I think that an internal process or an internal sort of mindset should be everything gets scheduled unless there's business justification that it shouldn't be. That's really where you kind of got to get to that point, right? And have an effective way to obviously tag environments. But, really, I think to get to a point where you really understand this, you really got to challenge the people that are building it to make sure that they're doing it in a way that's right. And the only way to really do that is to you have a default policy. Everything needs to be scheduled unless there's a business justification that it runs 24/7, right?
Well, so there's another way to look at this too, is of course, when we're sitting in the developer seat, we want to make the environment more efficient, and we want to refactor into ephemeral, elastic, on-demand resources. This is a step to move an organization in the right direction, especially when there's resistance around moving down that path. This is a way to get an organization to think in terms of it's not just dev, test, staging resources that are used during the day, but there's also inside. I've had this. I'll share an anecdote. I had this inside of applications I've built in the past or helped run in the past, where you end up with some worker workloads that need to do processing certain times of the day. And a lot of times we would do that after hours because we'd be using what would become idle compute later in the day. It's another example of where you can create scheduled instances, mimic ephemeral resources before you've made that refactor, to not have those application servers just sitting there all day long, idle or at low yield. You can start a bunch of them up, get through all your worker processes. You can actually detect that they're done, shut them down. And so it's a way to move down that path and save, and you still save money. You get immediate savings.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So techniques, Jason. What are some of the ways that that a listener could start to schedule their EC2 instances?
Well, the most basic form is set a reminder on your reminder app of choice and go into the console and shut them down and start them up. Obviously, that's a non-automated way to do it, but I think in with any technology, people, we get wrapped around the wheels and trying to automate something before we're even ready to. So, honestly, I'd
start simply.
Start somewhere, right? Set a reminder and start doing it.
Yep.
There are tools out there that help you do this. There's open source. There's some CloudFormation templates, right, which we can include in the links to the show to the CloudFormation template. You could script this out, obviously, right, just by running some AWS CLI commands. The most important thing, obviously, is that you know what can be shut down and when it can be shut down and started up, right? And that you're tracking that. And we would typically recommend just to create a tagging scheme that allows you to define start, stop, yes, no, things like that, right? A common tag that can be incorporated into your pipeline, tool chain, whatever it may be.
I think one of the first blog articles I wrote for Tenacity is exactly that. It's a tagging strategy with a Lambda function and, creating a cron job to, effectively schedule a regular check of the environment looking for tags for things that should be shut down and started up at certain intervals. In fact, we'll have to dig that out and put it in the show notes.
That's a good idea.
Blog post from
that's
2 years
exactly
ago.
what you can do. The first thing you need to do, whether you're using a tool you're paying for, open source, or your own scripting, whatever the case may be, is to understand what I can start and stop and when I can start and stop said thing, right? And tagging, as we'll link in the show notes to your blog post, is the best way to do that, right? I mean, and it's pretty easy to go in there and just tag. Can it be stopped? Yep. Yes. True, false, whatever. I don't know. However you want to do it.
What time?
And then what time?
When do I start it? When do I stop it? Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Make it super simple. And, I'd always recommend in this case to make sure you tag an owner so that someday when somebody's looking at this and going, why are we stopping and starting all these services? They know who to ask.
Yeah. I'm
going to start saying that in every podcast episode is tag your infrastructure with an owner for every piece of the infrastructure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree.
Cool. I think we've probably covered off on this topic. It's one of the ones that it's a simple enough topic, but it comes up a number of times, and I really don't hear anybody talking about it. And almost every time we bring it up, someone's like, oh, wait, okay, we should probably do that. There's 70% savings right there.
It's like people are afraid to shut stuff down. And I know why they are, because sometimes I'll, just go in there and shut some stuff down. Then I know we can shut down during certain times, and somebody always will say something, say like, why did you shut this down? I was like, well, it doesn't need to run during this time. Well, I was using it for something they don't need to be using it for, right? That's why they're afraid to do it. This is an internal mindset. But if you can if you can shift the paradigm internally, right, and if you want to get to a modernized environment, as you mentioned, this is a great stepping stone to doing that, because this is essentially what event-driven infrastructure does for you, right? It starts it and stops it only when you need it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's using a schedule basis to get down that path of how do I get to an interrupter event-driven infrastructure. Absolutely. Awesome. All right. I think that's a wrap on the episode. I don't have anything else to say on the topic. So go out to tenacity.ai, check out our website, learn more, get a demo, talk to us. We'll also have the cloud cost optimization white paper available for download. Looking for your feedback. We want to contribute back to the community, so we're going to continue to update that over time to share with you the techniques and lessons we learn for how to better manage your cloud environment. Thanks for listening.